Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and this is Brooklyn Savvy.
Hi, I'm Toni Williams, and welcome to Brooklyn Savvy. We are delighted to have Dr. Harriet Wims. Now, she is from the Village Family Support Center in Baltimore, Maryland. Yes, Brooklyn does bring Baltimore. And Harriet will be talking to us about a really interesting subject, which is Jews of color. But before we get started, let me introduce our Brooklyn Savvy panelistas. We have Dr. Maria DeLongoria, Dr. Tobie Stein, and Ellen Salpeter. Thank you, ladies, for joining us for this, what I think is going to be a really rich discussion. And I say that because in New York City, there is I think you guys tell me, I think it is the largest population of Jews outside of Israel. Can I say that? Is that good to say? Okay. So I really want to talk about Jews of color. So Dr. Wims, or should I call you Harriet? Is Harriet fine? Yes, Harriet. But before we do that, I think it's kind of important to talk about the Jewish community as not a monolith, right? It is not a monolith. Can we talk about the levels of observances so that our viewers can really understand how this is talked about and what it is?
I went to myjewishlearning.org as well as to a study that Pew just did on Jewish identity in the United States. And then finally, I am looking at an article written by Emma Green, Are Jews White?, written in The Atlantic for my information. So let's start with the statistics. First of all, 1/3 of Jews in the United States said in the Pew study that they don't belong to a particular denomination of the Jewish religion. Jewish religious denominations are mainly distinguished based on philosophical approaches to Jewish tradition and the interpretation of Jewish law or halakha. The three largest movements in order are the Reformed movement, which makes up 35% of religious Jews in the United States. And they describe themselves as a group as politically progressive and supporting social justice. They believe in personal choice in ritual observance. 18% of religious Jews identify as conservative, where Jewish law is obligatory, and 10% as Orthodox, where there's a traditional understanding of the Jewish law and strict observance of holidays such as the Sabbath, where there's no driving, no working on that day, and no turning on the electricity or turning it off. So I'll begin there.
I want to get back to this comment on are Jews white, right? And that's really quite interesting because quite honestly, if you didn't know better, you might think so. But how could that possibly be? You know, I mean, how is there a race that owns a religion and a way of being? So, Harriet, if you could talk to us about Jews of color,
sure,
to dispel the myth that Jews are all white.
It definitely is a myth, and that made me laugh because the story of my conversion is that I told a dear friend one day, I've always felt Jewish, but I knew I could never be because I'm Black. And my friend laughed out loud, thinking that it was a joke. And then when he realized that I was serious, he said, "Oh, honey, you have no idea. Jews are not white. They are of all races and backgrounds across the entire world." Studies suggest that there are probably 7 million Jews in the United States, and studies also suggest that 1 million of those are Jews of color across ethnic and racial background in the US.
Now, This is a question that I've had. Now, are you born Jewish, or do are you convert to Jewish? Meaning, talk to us a little about your experience there, Harriet, because you were not born Jewish, you converted to Judaism, correct?
I did convert to Judaism. I call myself a proud Jew by choice. And yet that is not the only, I guess, pathway to becoming Jewish. Some people marry into Jewish families and then choose to convert. That was not my case. It was an individual choice. And there are many, many, many Jews of color who are, I guess we could say, genetically linked to Judaism, in that there are linkages that move down from their previous generations. We used to, or many people look at Judaism as a matrilineal, from matrilineal descent, meaning from the mother. And there are many more people who also just explore Judaism in the genetic history.
I have a follow-up to that. So what in your personal background, or what in your experience, or what exposure did you have to Judaism to make you feel like you were supposed to be Jewish?
Yeah. I also want to point out that many people say that every Jewish soul was at the base of Sinai when Torah was received. And so there is the idea that for people like me who feel or felt called, that there's kind of a reason why. And I, if there were more time, I'd love to go into why the questioning around so many things is so beautiful related to Judaism, because sometimes the answers are not as important as the questions and the coming together to question. When I was 6 years old, my mother was 46 when I was born, and she actually had her tubes tied. So I was a major, major surprise. And
Miracle.
so when I was 6, I went to my mother and I said, I no longer believe in formalized religion, and I no longer believe in any religion that separates a child from a parent for learning. And she was, I can't imagine now myself at 53, what in the world that must have been like. But she said, okay, fine. You're going to have to study religions to figure out which one you want, because you're going to have a religion. And so I remember my father and I would go to the library several times a week. And so I knew exactly where the section on world religions was. And I began studying. And I can recall when I was in Brownies, so, in elementary school, learning about Judaism, but not knowing where one could further explore. And I recall my mother saying, well, if you want to be Jewish, then you figure out where their church is. And in my small southern town, there was no synagogue that I could join or visit. And as I aged, I explored a number of religions and came to meet many people from lots of different religions. And the one that really held true in my heart was Judaism. And that same friend who laughed when I talked about wanting to be Jewish took me to his synagogue. And I heard the cantor, the musical leader, davening, praying, and in Hebrew. And I don't really know exactly how to explain it. It was a language that my soul knew.
Ooh, interesting.
And that it brought me home.
Did you feel embraced when you went to the synagogue? Did you feel that the Jewish community, Ellen, I saw you kind of shake your head a little bit. What did you mean by that, Ellen? I caught that.
No, I mean, it was interesting to feel you came home, like that feeling of welcoming. I mean, I felt that also, not so much about a place of faith as much as like when I moved to Paris. I felt like I come home, but I was just laughing at kind of that feeling of like you felt other until you land someplace where you do feel welcomed.
Yeah. I guess I'll start by telling you that I did start an organization, and I often joke that I started the organization by accident during our COVID quarantine. Before COVID hit, Ilana Kaufman, who's the executive director of the Jews of Color Initiative, which is an organization that works hard to support other organizations led by Jews of color and to support initiatives that support Jews of color. Ilana Kaufman was coming to Baltimore, and Baltimore, I had heard many years ago, actually has the second largest community of Jews outside of New York City. And so I was there listening to Ilana Kaufman talk about the importance of equity and inclusion within Jewish spaces and how to embrace Jews of color so that they would come back to these larger institutions. And I stood up to ask a question, and I happened to turn around and look at the room, and there were maybe 25 or 30 Jews of color, more Jews of color in a single room than I had ever seen in my life. And I said to them, oh my gosh, we're family, and I don't even know you, but I'm going to get to know you. And I came home and talked to some friends, and we started a Baltimore Jews of Color program on Facebook. And then later on Facebook, I put out a post, and I had gotten to know Jews of color across the country at that point by reaching out to them. And I wrote, anybody want to do a Jews of Color Shabbaton, which is a weekend retreat, kind of like a revival. And Jews of color from across the country said, yes, absolutely. And then the JOC initiative wrote to me and said, you should apply for a grant. And so we wrote a grant, and the program was funded. This Shabbaton was funded not only by JOCI, but also by UJA in New York, and also the Schusterman Family Fund supported us. And so we were able to not only offer 10 sessions around resilience building among Jewish people of color, but we also had our first JOC Shabbaton, not the first, but it was the first virtual Shabbaton. We had over 5,700 hits on our website for the Shabbaton, and we had over 560 people participate in the Shabbaton virtually, not only across the whole United States, but we even had people attend from Africa, specifically Uganda, and also Israel.